the second session of my SQL and PL SQL. As you know that last session we have already discussed about SQL and PL SQL in a very vivid manner, like what is SQL, why SQL is a language, what is PL SQL. PL SQL is not basically a language. So today this session is completely dedicated to PL SQL, what actually PL SQL is all about, why PL SQL is not basically treated as a language. So all these things we are going to discuss today. So in the live session, in the last live session, I have discussed about SQL is an ANSI standard language. It is not belongs to Oracle, and I discussed vividly about your SQL. Then today's session is completely dedicated for PL SQL. Why PL SQL is not a language? Because in the last session, in the last live session, we have discussed something little bit about PL SQL, and whosoever watched that live session, you know that PL SQL or PL SQL is not basically a language. Why it is not a language? Last session I told you, like to become a language, like if I talk about C is basically a language as because it is having certain features. C++ is a language having certain features. Java is a language having certain features. C#.NET, your Python, these are basically known as one language as because they have certain criteria. As I said, when we are seeing a doll or we see a particular dummy of human, so you cannot call it as a human as because though it looks like a human, but it is not human because it lacks certain features. And we are called as humans as because we are supporting all the features, because we are having some organic system, we are having some properties as well as some behaviors. Just like that, in an interview, this kind of very simple questions interviewer asked, like define C is basically a language, C++ is a language, Java is a language. So it's not like that you cannot give the answer like this as because it is communicating with the database computer, so that we are calling it as a language. It's a very childish answer basically. So to define it, why C is a language, Java is a language, so you can tell like this. Remember one thing, to become a typical language, a language supports 5 different features as we have discussed in the live session, last live session: identifier, literal, constant, delimiter, and having its own statements. You can stretch it out, but I confined it to 5 rules: identifier, literal, constant, delimiter, and statement. So one by one we are going to discuss. Once we discussed all these rules, then we put all these rules in C, then we'll find it out whether C is a language or not. Put it in Java, we'll find it out whether Java is a language or not. Then we will put it in PL SQL, and we are going to judge whether PL SQL is satisfying all these rules or not. First comes to identifier. So what do you mean by an identifier? You please keep in your mind, it's a very means fundamental topic. So identifier means what? Identifier is nothing but a naming convention of memory location which holds a value for a temporary period whose value changes time to time. What? Identifier is nothing but a naming convention of memory location which holds a value for a temporary period whose value changes time to time. As because its value changes time to time, in layman's language we are calling it as a variable. From the student's point of view, we always call it as a variable, but actually technically it is known as an identifier. So what actually it is, just I am showing you. Like when I'm talking about this identifier, like this is the concept, you just watch it out. When I'm talking about, I'm taking a very simple example of C. If you are going to write INTI, what actually happens inside in the background when we run the program? What actually happens? Ki automatically a 2 byte of memory is created in the stack. Like this type of memory is going to be created, and the name of that particular memory will be I. That means when you run the C program, this type of memory is being created whose name is supposed to be I. So that means I is not something, I is a particular name given to the memory location. So when we are going to write like this, I is equal to 1000, actually what is happening in the memory, that means actually 1000 is not stored inside the I, Actually 1000 is basically stored inside that location which is identified by I. That means 1000 is not stored inside the I. Actually it is stored inside the memory which is identified by the I. And already we have seen in some languages, because you might have done some type of languages. Suppose if you write I is equal to 5000 right now, so what will happen? Or I is equal to 500 right now, what will happen? Now this particular value will be erased, will be vanished, and 500 will be stored inside this I repeat again, 500 will be stored inside this I. So as because we can change the value during our program execution, so that we are calling it as a variable. But actually identifier is nothing but a naming convention of a memory location which holds a value for a temporary period whose value changes time to time. And as you know that whenever a program starts, a memory location is being created, and once the program is being executed, the memory location is vanished. So as because its value keep changing, so that we are calling it as a identifier, as an identifier. Then comes your literal. Literal means what? When we are talking about this literal, I repeat again, when we are talking about this literal means what? Now simple concept is any value assigned into an identifier. Literal means what? Any value assigned into an identifier is known as literal. Such as, like when we are saying, like when suppose take the example, I am talking about this 500. Actually this 500 is a literal for I repeat again, 500 is literal for I. This 1000 is a literal for I. Any value, simple concept is, if you are going to declare a variable like string in any language, if you are declaring a variable called string a is equal to csoft, that means csoft is a literal for a. If you are going to write like this, suppose float j is equal to 67.89, so this is also a literal. So literal means any value assigned into an identifier is known as a literal for the processing purpose. Why we are putting the value into an identifier? Because for the processing purpose. So remember one thing, literal may be a character, maybe a string, maybe a floating number, maybe a general number, maybe an octal number, maybe a hexa number. Or in C, as we already have some idea about the pointers, like one variable's address can be stored in another variable. That means one variable's address may be the literal for another variable, that is also literal. So literal means any value assigned into an identifier for the processing purpose. Then comes your constant. Constant means what? Remember, if somebody asks you, sir, how can you define a constant? So remember one thing, in my view, constant is basically a concept. Constant is basically a concept through which a value is assigned into an identifier in such a manner which cannot be changed during runtime. I repeat again, constant is basically a concept through which a value is assigned into an identifier in such a manner which cannot be changed during runtime. Like I can give you simple example of this, like in basically C, suppose we are going to write const int I is equal to suppose 5000. That means what does it mean? That means this 5000 is being stored inside the I, which never be changed during runtime. That means after this constant declaration, if you are going to start modifying the value like I is equal to 3500, simple concept, it is going to show you the error. I repeat again, this is going to show you the error because it is already declared as constant. This is constant. Once you write constant means the value is fixed to that particular identifier which cannot be changed during runtime. So the question comes, sir, where we can take the help of constant, because many students they always like in a hanky-panky manner they may remember constant is this that means the value cannot be changed during runtime. But why? Remember one thing, as a student perspective, as a student point of view, when you are learning something, why, what, when, these are the three W's every interviewer is hankering to get. That means once you are sitting in an interview, every interviewer, their intent to means know that whether you know something or already, that means you are having a one type of conventional methodology, that means you know something, but why you are using this. So please remember, when we are talking about your constant, where it is basically used, as you know that some values are fixed, that means 1 kilogram is having a fixed number of gram, 1 second is a fixed number of milliseconds. Like take the example, in my C program or in a program, what I want to do, I want to access the second in form of milliseconds. As you all know that 1000 millisecond is equal to second. I do not want to use 1 second, I want to use 1000 millisecond as a second, because suppose stopwatch type of programming you are doing in your project. Suppose you want to store like you want to like this 1000 millisecond is equal to 1 second, you want to access like this for any reason. So what I'm going to do right now, intms or intms is equal to, what I'm going to do, suppose const intms is equal to 1000. So what I did, this 1000, I repeat again, this 1000 is being stored inside the ms in form of constant. That means you cannot change the milliseconds value. That means millisecond is fixed to 1000. That means wherever you want this second, you can use this millisecond, or you can write like this, second is equal to 1000. So wherever you use second, this means this 1000 is being used. That means whenever we are talking about this ms, suppose I declared it as ms is equal to 1000, that means wherever you want to use that second, you have to use that ms, so that 1000 is fixed and you cannot change the value of ms. So constant means what? Suppose you want to store kilogram in form of gram, so you can store the gram within a constant and you can use it as a gram. So you want a value is not supposed to be changed within your program. At that point of time, you can take the help of constant. So please remember one thing, literal, constant, identifier, these are the one elements of your programming language. And this particular thing is going to be asked in an interview. Like an interviewer is going to ask you, all constants are literals, but all literals never be treated as constants, true or false? Your answer will be, sir, true. All constants are literals, but all literals never be constants, because in this fashion, that 1000 is basically what? 1000 is basically what? A literal. 1000 is a literal for this variable ms, which is treated as a constant. But can you call 500 available inside I? Is it constant? No, it is not constant, because I value can be changed. You just look into this program, I is equal to 1000. In certain point after that, what I change the value of I. That is, as because the value of I is changed, so that you cannot call i's value is constant, but here ms value is constant because you have declared it as constant. So in an interview, this question definitely being asked, like all constants are literals, but all literals never be constant. Sir, it is true. That means a literal constant is a literal, but all literals never be constants. Then comes your delimiters. What is a delimiter? So delimiters means what? As because we may have some knowledge about language, like as you know that many students having means what, technical background or non-technical background, they might have done C and C++. These are the common common courses which is being done by any student. So please remember one thing, we know that so many symbols we are going to use in a language, but if you ask a student, what I practically saw in my experience, when we sit before an interviewer, so many things the people may use, but once we start asking them what actually this is, so they are completely mum. So remember one thing, as far as the C is concerned, so many symbols we are using, like curly start, curly end for blockings. You like use semicolon for termination. You may use square bracket start, square bracket end for the array. You may use slash star and star slash for your comment line. So remember one thing, any symbolic representation in a particular language is known as one delimiters. I repeat again, any symbolic representation in a particular language is known as a delimiter. C, C++, Java, they have their own delimiters. Like some delimiters may be used in C, may not be used in Java. Some delimiters are being used in Java, may not be used in C#.NET. So every language, they have their own symbolic representation, and that symbolic representation is technically known as a delimiter. So if you define delimiter, delimiters are nothing but some special symbols having special meaning inside a language, and near about all the languages uses certain kind of delimiters. Definitely some symbols are available in a programming language and we call it as a delimiter. But as far as the Python is concerned, if you are having some idea about the Python does not have any delimiters. Python is very simple language and we can use very simple codes for that. But Python in certain cases also you may face certain kind of delimiter. It's not having so many complicated delimiters as we have encountered in C, C++ and Java, but delimiters are also there in Python also, but in a very little manner. And last but not the least, there is your statements. What statement means what? Like if I tell you statements, remember one thing, in certain cases we call statements are commands. Statements are called commands. Like in Oracle, we call statements like insert, update, delete, select, create, alter, drop, truncate. These are your commands, or in technical term we are calling it as statements. Like remember one thing, so many statements are there in each and individual language. They have their own respective job. Like in C you are using printf, or you are using scanf. In C++ you are using cin, or you are using cout to for the input output purpose. In Java you are using system dot out dot println, or in .NET we are using console dot writeline. So remember, students are saying that these are the built-in functions. Yes, functions are also commands. So these are already predefined functions. If you want to show something, some output in Java, you have to write system.out.println. If you want to display output in C++, you have to write cout. Instead of cout, there is no alternative to display the output in C++. That means certain commands are fixed to the language. And please remember one thing, though we are calling it as functions in a language, but general meaning, these are the commands for that language. That means if you give this command, the output will be this. So please remember, statements, if you call statements are predefined commands to accomplish a specific job in a specific language. So to become a language, what we discussed: identifier, literal means what, constant means what, delimiter means what, statement means what. And statements are predefined commands to accomplish a job by a particular language. Now we are going to use all these 5 features in C first, and we are going to check whether C is a language or not. Do believe me, C supports all these 5 features. It is having its own identifier, own literal, constants, delimiters, statements. If you put all these features in C++, identifier is there, literal is there, constant is there, delimiter is there, statements are there. If you put all this feature in Java, you will find that Java is a language, C# is a language, because they are following all these features as far as a language is concerned. But if I talk about your PL SQL, though we are calling it PL SQL is a language, now what we are going to do, we are going to put all these 5 features in PL SQL. Do believe me, identifier is there because PL SQL is a hard code programming language, hard code programming concept. As we have done programming in C, in PL SQL also we can do programming. But the difference between C++ and PL SQL is, in C++ we can develop an application. That means C++, Java, C#, Python, these are basically meant for application development language, so that in certain cases we are calling it as a front end. So these are called your front end. That means front end is nothing but an application through which the data of a database will be presented in a customized manner. Not only database, like you can design a calculator, you can design a Winamp or a media player, you can design a paintbrush type application, you can design a Microsoft Word type application. Those are not known as your application based programming language. But PL SQL is supporting all the programming features like C, C++. But the job of PL SQL is to manipulate the database using SQL commands. So now I am putting all these 5 features in PL SQL, and we are going to check whether PL SQL is a language or not. PL SQL supports identifier, variables are there. PL SQL uses literals. PL SQL is having its own constant. PL SQL is having its own delimiter. You are going to get semicolon, like a comment line. So many things are there. But PL SQL does not have its own statements. I repeat again, PL SQL does not have its own statement. PL SQL uses the statements of SQL to do so. Like take the example, you can write if, suppose you are going to write this particular command in PL SQL, you are going to write this particular command in PL SQL, like suppose if job, if job is equal to your manager. And why I am putting it in single quotation mark? In PL SQL, strings characters are being put in single quotation mark. Right now you don't have to means bother about that. If I do some means what sessions on this PL SQL in my further means live classes, I can explain that in a clear manner. As I always keep telling you, these are the very fundamental concepts what I am discussing right now, because it's totally valueless if I design or if I do a particular class which is completely unknown to you. Suppose take the example, today I'm going to do a class on suppose a cursor, because the people who are totally unaware about PL SQL, so he or she doesn't understand what is cursor and what is going on actually. So those things we'll discuss in the subsequent sessions. But I do believe once a student, unless and until a student is conceptually clear what the session is all about, so further session is not useful to that student. So I am not creating all these sessions, or I am not creating these sessions and making it live in YouTube not to show my capability what I can teach. I want to share my knowledge with you, that you know something, you know the fundamental things. And as I commit commit to you, like in different further sessions, I am going to discuss so many other things which is very interesting, and you are going to learn everything from the scratch, from the bottom part. So in subsequent classes also, in subsequent session also, I'll discuss all these things, but now we will concentrating upon this thing. If job is equal to manager, suppose then what we are going to write, if job is equal to manager, then what we are going to write? Suppose here I can write insert into, suppose a student table, then values such and such, I can give values like this. So remember one thing, as we know that this if condition is belongs to what? If condition is belongs to PL SQL. But the insert statement what I have written, here, the insert statement what I have written, this is not belongs to PL SQL. This is being borrowed from the SQL. So please remember one thing, once we start programming in PL SQL, as I said, it is responsible to manipulate the database. And to manipulate database from the beginning, in the last session I told you, SQL is the primary language. To manipulate any relational database or object relational database, you cannot use any language rather than SQL. So as I said, PL SQL, why it is pronounced as PL SQL? Because it lacks statements to manipulate the database. Insert, update, select, commit, rollback, whatever commands we are going to write in PL SQL. So those are not basically the commands of SQL, PL SQL. Those are commands of SQL. So that it is pronounced as procedural language extension of what? SQL. So now we proved that PL SQL, though pronounced as a language, but it is not a typical language because it lacks its statements to manipulate the database. It borrows the commands from the SQL to do so. So as I said, this is the complete fundamental concept about PL SQL. Here it is completely written also. Identifier, it is nothing but a naming convention of memory location which holds a value for a temporary period and whose value changes time to time. And I said ki, those are non-technical known as variables, literals. Any value assigned into an identifier known as literal. A literal may be anything such as character, number, date, string, etc., etc. Then comes your constant. It is basically a concept through which a value is assigned into an identifier in such a manner which cannot be changed during runtime. Like take the example, if I want to assign a value and you want this value should not be changed within this particular program, you declare it as a constant. In other words, it is said that all constants are literals, but all literals never be constant. If you watch me in a very means what means if you seriously interested about the fundamental of the concepts, definitely I can tell you these are very conceptual concepts which is going to help you in an interview. If you face an interview, 100% sure these questions are going to be asked if somebody is sitting before you which is having a huge amount of experience. Then comes your delimiter. These are nothing but some special symbols having special meaning inside a language, such as curly start, curly end, semicolon, etc., etc. Statement. Apart from the above features, a language must have its special statements or commands to do a specific job that is called as statement. That means, remember one thing, if I implement all this feature in PL SQL, so PL SQL lacks its own statement to manipulate the database. Again, I am telling you the fact, quote unquote, its own statements. So here I can tell you, like if PLSQL is not typically treated as a language, so what it will be, or what it is supposed to be known as. So here at the end it is written, PL SQL is not treated as a typical language because it does not have its own statement to manipulate the database. It uses the statement of SQL to do so. Treated as a typical language because it does not have its own statement. So what actually PL SQL is? PLSQL is a program technique. Here it is written, though PLSQL is pronounced as a language, it is not a language typically. It's a program technique. So please remember one thing. Now onwards, any language pronounced as a language may not be a language. And last class I told you, because um, I am having certain amount of experience, so I want to I know that how to prepare students actually where students means lacks their concept, because knowing so many technologies and you're talking about technologies and your scratch is not clear, nobody can hit an interview. Nowadays the interview is very dynamic. Don't say anywhere that I have done so many courses, I have done Oracle, I have done .NET, I have done Java, I have done Python, I have done. Don't do all these things. You do only one front end, only one back end. Don't exaggerate it to different courses. Don't means what, busy yourself in several courses, but you don't know anything about the single concept. To grab a job for any fresher, believe me, to grab a job by any fresher, the simple methodology is you do a front end, you do a back end, do some projects, then go to the market. And technology may be anything. You may do means what, Java, Oracle, you do .NET, Oracle, you do any front end and back end you have to do. Then go to the market. Believe me, once you grab a job, then you can gamble, then you can do technologies, then Python, then other things, then some BI or means Azure or some courses you do. But first grab a job. If you don't have a job in your hand, doing so many courses, having nothing, you will wondering like nomads, like this course, okay, it's not having my knowledge, good knowledge, that course again lacking the knowledge, again another course. Doing all this such kind of bullshit things, not going to be that means you are not going to successful in career. So please remember one thing, PL SQL is not basically a language, it's a program technique. And as I said in the last class also, because as a teacher it's my duty to discuss everything, not about only the PL SQL. Last class I told you HTML is not basically a language. HTML also pronounced as a language, but not it is a typical language. Now today we are going to prove why HTML is not a language, from this format, because I have given you a format, you implement anywhere. Now do one thing, put all these 4 5 features in HTML. Automatically you come to a conclusion like whether HTML is a language or not. So remember one thing, HTML is having nothing. Identifier is not there, literal, constant, delimiter, only it is having its own statements. And in HTML, statements are known as your tags. Like you might have seen, like bold tag, end bold tag, italic tag, end italic tag, h1 tag, end h1 tag. That means these are the tags, these are the tags, but these are the commands for HTML. And believe me, if somebody says why HTML, it's pronounced as language, but it is not, you are saying that it's not a language. So simply you tell these 5 features, sir, it is having its own statement but doesn't have it. And to prove, to give the solid proof, na, you ask anybody like, sir, if HTML is a language, can you declare a variable in HTML? Can you declare a can you write if else statement? Can you write for loop? Can it have a constant? Can it have a symbols in means HTML? And if HTML is a language, why it uses JavaScript and VBScript as a scripting language? So please remember one thing, if you want to focus a particular language or database or anything, you focus it from the very tiny part. And it is my sincere request to all my students who are watching this means what channel or session. So do any one course, but you do it in a proper manner. Market is on for everything. If you search Google, huge amount of jobs are in .NET, huge amount of jobs are in Oracle, huge amount of jobs are in C++, huge amount of jobs are in any language. Don't bother about that. He is saying that I have to do this course so that I will grab a job, but it's a very bullshit thing. You do Java, you do .NET, you do Oracle. These are the market trending. That means they are actually trending in the market. Yes, no doubt, no new technologies are coming, but my request is first you grab a job, then you gamble with your career. Don't gamble from the student career, from the student point of view. If I am a student and if I gamble with my career, I am doing so many courses but I am not good in any language or any course, so definitely that course is having no meaning. So this is my sincere request to you students, because as I said, my job is not to show something. I want to share my experiences in this YouTube channel. And please remember one thing, you share, you learn, you see this video many times so that you can have your conceptual clearance. And in future once you start facing interview, these are the small things which matters a lot in my view. And in coming sessions I'll share so many new things, new tricks for your career. As I know that a teacher's job is not to teach students only. It's not my job. Every day I will come with a subject and I will discuss all these things. I also discuss something about your career, how you can grow your career, in which manner you can go and you will grab a IT job, because IT is booming. IT was there, IT is there, and IT will retain for lifetime, because you know that IT doesn't have any substitute. And nowadays every sector is being controlled by the IT. So don't think that I am doing a course for the sake of my bread and butter. Don't think like that. If you research, if you learn something from the conceptual learning, if you learn from the root part, if you make your concepts clear, one day you will grab such kind of position where the people are going to say like IT gives us a life, IT gives us a beautiful life where we can cherish ourselves. So this is the thing, and in subsequent sessions I'll discuss some new things from the scratch. My job is not to show you some hanky panky things which is not understandable by you and you feel bored. It's not like that. I will come with new interesting things, with career guidance also. It's not like that only in technical part. I will come with some career guidance, what to do, what not to do, what can be done by a fresher. And do remember one thing, you please you can contact me through mail or through number, or you go to, come to our CSOP site, csofttechnology.com. So you can contact us for if you want referrals, job referrals, if you want some job opportunities. Definitely we are going to help you, because we are having a company, we are having association with Instaminds Technologies, so we will help you in any manner. So thank you for today's session. I hope this session is very fruitful to you, and hope your career will grow like anything. Best of luck, and I will come with a new subject, new interesting subject, like your big data, your Hadoop, your Power BI, or anything. I will come with any fundamental thing. Don't expect some huge amount of things. Rather than I will come time to time with some sessions which is helpful to you. Thank you, and God bless you. Watch my channel and share it.